Well, good morning and thank you for joining me after the bank holiday weekend. I hope you had a good weekend. We in church on Sunday were looking at Moses from Hebrews 11. That's from Hebrews 11 verse 23 to 29, and we're going to think about him as a result during these next 4 days. So Hebrews 11 talks about Moses and his faith, and how he weighed up the losses and gains that he would make and acted on the basis of faith. So he was a man of faith, great faith. But I want to think about some of the background to it and the way in which he didn't start quite so well. In fact, it started rather badly. You need to go back to Exodus chapter 2, 3, and 4, and you'll see there that Moses, who'd been brought up as an Egyptian after being adopted into the royal family, he acted in a way quite suddenly, it seems to us. It wasn't actually in his mind. He rescued an Israelite from a beating that he was being given by an Egyptian, by killing the Egyptian. Now, the next day it tells us that he tried to separate two Israelites who were fighting. And the one who was obviously doing the beating turned round to Moses and said, "Well, who made you a judge over us? You know, well, what right do you have to say this? Are you going to kill me as you kill the Egyptian?" Moses realizes at that point that things are not right. If you go to Acts chapter 7, you get a short comment on this from Stephen the martyr. It's in his final defense speech. And he comments on Moses in the way in which Moses thought at that point that the people would recognize that God was using him to rescue them. He'd rescuing one Israelite from an Egyptian. He thought they would make the connection. He can rescue us from all of them. Well, they didn't. And he had to flee as a result. And this rejection evidently scarred him. And you can see that in Exodus 2 to 4. So it tells us that Moses ran to the wildlands outside of Egyptian control in the desert, meets up with a Midianite family and marries into that family, has children, and for 40 years puts any thought of rescuing God's people to the back of his mind. And during that period, the Israelites are increasingly oppressed and persecuted and exploited. They call out to God, but Moses, he's not coming. Well, Exodus chapter 3 tells us that Moses, in pasturing his flocks, takes them a little bit further one time, heads to the far side of the desert, and there ends up at the mountain of God, Horeb, as it was called then. We know it in Exodus as Sinai. And there God appears to him in the burning bush. And the essence of the conversation from God is, you're going back. You're called as leader to rescue my people, so you're going back. But from Moses' side, the conversation is using every excuse in the book to resist that and to say he didn't want to do it. It's almost comical, actually. I know it's quite serious business, but it's almost comical in the way that the conversation goes, is that Moses starts out by saying, well, who am I? Doubting himself. Who am I? And the Lord doesn't say, well, you're a prince in the royal family. He says, no, I'll be with you. And then Moses says, yeah, but if I go and say, God's called me, what am I going to say about you? And God says, well, tell them that the great I am, Yahweh, is sending you. And well, he says, yeah, but actually, what if they don't accept me? And God says, well, here's a couple of signs you can do, the turning of the staff into the snake and so on. And God says, and then Moses says, well, yeah, but I'm not a good speaker, really. And God says, well, I will help you speak. I will give you the words. And it ends with Moses just simply saying, Lord, please send somebody else. See, it is almost comical in the way it goes. It does give us some helpful insights into the man and the background to him, that he was, yes, a man of great faith and deeds and leadership, outstanding in many ways, and rightly is remembered since then. But his starting point, well, it's complete failure. You know, we don't know his exact thought processes when he killed the Egyptian, but he evidently hadn't forgotten who he was, that he was an Israelite, for all the fact he'd been adopted into the Egyptian family, royal family. And then he's obviously realized that God is calling him in this position that he has to rescue Israel. It's almost like Joseph in a way. Joseph using that position to save his family. Perhaps Moses was thinking along those lines. Well, that's not how it worked out. He leapt in, assuming that everybody would fall in with him and recognize him as the great deliverer, the great savior in the pattern of Joseph. But it doesn't work. He falls flat on his face and he has to run, and he doesn't look back. He's failed. He's not coming back. He's not going to try that again. Well, the good news is that God takes failures and is able to mold them in the image that he wants them to be. He can remake them, repair them, put them back on track. You could say that he'd been doing that with Moses for the 40 years he was in the desert, and maybe that was the training that he needed. Well, 40 years in the desert, shepherding sheep. What was the next 40 years of his life? Well, that was going to be shepherding people. The Bible leaves you in no doubt which is the more difficult of those two. So God takes failures and remakes them. That's great news. And it's also good news that it's never too late. Moses was an old man by the time the Exodus story begins, 80. Now, I know he's going to live longer than any of us are going to do so, but he's 2/3 of the way through his life. And here he is with a new start. Most of us, 2/3 of the way through our average lifespan, are thinking, well, when am I going to retire? Well, he wasn't given that choice, and neither are we, really. You're not likely to be called to be like Moses and rescue the people in the way that he did. No, that's not true. But there is always opportunity to serve. It's never too late. Maybe you can be slightly different from Moses. Maybe you can follow a better example from one of the later prophets and say, here am I, send me. Well, may God enable you to do that. And we'll see you with a few more thoughts about Moses tomorrow.